Gears of War, a story of tragedy, survival, and brotherhood. When Emergence Day began, the humans were attacked by an unknown enemy. Taken by surprise, we scrambled to gather our forces, and we fought back. Many years later, the war continues, with our cities in ruins, our homes left behind, and memories of a happier time. What caused the war between the Locust and humans, and who are the key figures in this story? This video will cover many topics from the Gears of War franchise, ranging from the Locust Society, its hierarchy, the early days of their army, the Queen of the Locust, and more. These are all videos I have done in the past, but compiled in one complete video. This will make it easier to go through topics if you don't want to find them in my playlist. Before we begin, make sure you leave a like on the video, and the timestamps will be available so you can find a specific topic that you want to go to. Thank you for watching, and enjoy. Before Raam became the general of the Locust army, and before he would become the Queen's most respected commander, Raam was only a lieutenant in the army. The events before Emergence Day give us details on why the Locust started a war against the humans. When Raam fought against the Lambent, he was brave, ruthless, and cunning. As the Lambent spread through the Hollow, even Raam himself would go into battle to fight together with his loyal followers. In order to protect the sacred temple, all of his forces had to fight without fear. Even Skorge himself would be a great ally to Raam. As Raam and the others fought off the Lambent, he already planned to invade the surface in the future. But such an act would be seen as treason in the eyes of Uzil Sraak, the current general of the Locust army. Raam wanted to save his people, to let them taste victory, and to rule the surface. This is when Skorge would pledge his allegiance to Raam's plan. And this is when we meet Uzil Sraak, a massive Locust with tremendous size and strength. He commanded Vold Raam to defend the Gorgon line against the Lambent, but instead, Raam had destroyed it all. Raam was aware that the Lambent were spreading within the Hollow at a rapid rate, too fast for the Locust to control, so his plan was to tell the Queen that the battle against the Lambent was lost. But Uzil Sraak would not accept the truth, and instead chose to silence Raam. He smashed Raam to the floor and left him battered and bloody. As the Queen approaches Sraak for updates, he assures her that the Hollow is safe from the Lambent, but this is a lie. Raam is then sent back to the Gorgon line to battle against a Corpser. Meanwhile, the Council speak with the Queen about the events unfolding. They learn that Raam has his own secret agenda, so they plan ahead just in case he betrays his Queen. But they are cautious in their approach because they cannot risk losing Raam, for he is an experienced Vold, born in battle and forged with experience, something Uzil Sraak does not have, and so they let Raam continue with his plan without interference. While Raam continues fighting off the Lambent, Skorge is joined by Ketor, and they both agree that the war is lost. They must bring the truth to the Queen before it's too late. As Raam returns to the Council, he is greeted by his fellow Theron guards, and they tell him, when the time comes, do not forget your allies, meaning they will serve Vold Raam because he is highly respected within the army. Back in the council room, Ketor explains that Skorge's vision was true. The temple was going to be overrun, and only Raam and his forces came to help. Vold Karn then shows up and explains that the war against the Lambent is lost. With 3 lieutenants giving the same story to the Queen, she then starts to doubt Uzil Sraak's words. This is when Sraak is removed from his position, and Raam becomes the new general. The Queen tells Raam that she was waiting for an outsider to help them with the Lambent problem, but this person only gave her false hope, and so she agrees to invade the surface to save her people. This is the start of Emergence Day. As Raam and his forces overtake the first human outpost fairly easily, before he can revel in his victory, he is attacked by Sraak and challenged to become the leader of the Locust. Sraak does not believe in being given a title, he wants to take it. As Raam jumps in, Sraak holds him by the neck, but Raam kicks away just as 2 torque arrows pierce Sraak in the back. The explosion blows 2 holes into Sraak's torso and he is defeated. It turns out the Theron guards pledged their allegiance to Raam, not to Sraak, because Raam was born to be a leader. Raam then rips out Sraak's heart from his destroyed body and continues his war against the humans. The story shows that no matter how strong Sraak was, he did not have the battle experience or the loyalty of the bloodied vanguard on his side. Sraak's lies to the Queen and his arrogance was his downfall. The Queen knew about Raam's plan and tested him to see if he was loyal to her. They both shared the same vision, to save the Locust from the Lambent. So that covers the story of Uzil Sraak in Gears of War. It also explains how Raam became the general. Who is General Raam in Gears of War? Now, during his early life, Raam took part in the war against the humans as a standard drone soldier. He later rose to the ranks of a Theron guard, which was only for the elite of the Locust. One would have to prove themselves with combat knowledge, intelligence, and leadership to be appointed to this level. Raam was different amongst the others. He displayed a great amount of skill, strength, intellect, and was loyal to the Queen. And so later on he was appointed the leader of the Locust military after the death of General Karn. Raam was seen to use many weapons like a Boltok pistol and a handheld Troika machine gun, but his most favored weapon was a serrated sword which he used at close range on a few humans. And throughout his time in the war, he found a way to control the Kryll. They were bat-like creatures that remained in darkness. They were vicious in nature and could tear up a target in seconds. He would also master his control over the Kryll to command them to attack, or to surround him as a shield. The only weakness the Kryll had was sunlight. He led an attack in Elima City 10 years before Emergence Day. His goal was to take control of this area that would lead them to the capital of Ephyra. Now a giant Kryll storm was covering the sky of the city, and with the use of cedars and the nemesis to ink up the sky, this would block out the sunlight for the Kryll to cover the city. Raam possessed incredible brute strength, as he was seen to kick vehicles and would punch through walls. And during this battle, he would kill off Alicia Valera. Near the end of this encounter, Raam controlled a Reaver that also had the ability to use the Kryll as a shield or weapon. Although it was shot down, Raam suffered some injuries in the crash and was confronted by Lieutenant Min Young Kim, but he summoned his Kryll to protect him, and the survivors escaped. Now, sometime later, Raam led a small group of Theron guards to Pharaoh Bridge, where a gear squad was stationed. As the humans defended their position, Raam and his team moved in and were close to victory until 4 King Raven helicopters showed up to shoot them. Raam quickly jumped over the bridge and swam to safety, as his Theron guards were killed off. When he led a war against the humans on Serra, he developed a strategy in targeting the gear leaders and killing them off, as a way of demoralizing the survivors and leaving them without leadership. And it was during the COG's mission of the Light Mass Offensive when Raam would meet Min Young Kim once again. But this time, Kim was killed by Raam. He would later capture a gear soldier and use his helmet to discover the plans of the Light Mass bomb. He would be seen again on the Tyro Pillar train, guarding the front as a way of not letting the gear soldiers to insert the targeting device. He fought against Marcus Phoenix and Dominic Santiago while using a handheld Troika machine gun and surrounded himself with the Kryll, but he was killed off when the Kryll were removed and he was shot to death. Now, although the story of Raam ended here, his character model was brought back in future games of Gears of War for multiplayer. He also made an appearance in the video game Killer Instinct as a playable character. So if you like the Gears of War franchise, who is your favorite character? Let me know in the comments section. Who is the Locust Skorge in the Gears of War universe? He was part of the Cantus race and rose up the ranks to become the High Priest. And after the death of General Raam during the Light Mass Offensive, Skorge was appointed as the new leader of the Locust army. The weapons he used were the Gorgon Burst Pistol, ink grenades, and a dual chainsaw staff that was very deadly in close-range combat. He wore different armor, and his helmet resembled more of a headdress with reddish-brown leather straps on the side. The armor on his forearms and thighs had spiked plating, and his chest was covered in a small piece of armor. When he became the High Priest of the Cantus monks, Skorge preached about the religion of the Locust. They saw the Riftworm as a divine being or god, and for some reason, Skorge was the only one who could communicate with the Riftworm. But when it came to their food source, they were also known to eat the rockworms, which were creatures in the hollow. Now, after the death of General Raam, this was an opportunity for Skorge to become the Queen's bodyguard and leader of the Locust army. During a battle on Landdown, Skorge showed up and battled against the humans. Skorge would appear to be a very agile Locust and had a vast knowledge in close-range combat. His dual chainsaw staff was able to cut through a Centaur tank. This encounter would lead to Ty and a few gears being captured. Anyone who was taken alive by the Locust would end up being tortured, lobotomized, and killed. Later on, Skorge would use the Riftworm to destroy Ilima, and after that, Delta Squad would kill the Riftworm from within by cutting up its multiple hearts. He would later defend the palace from the Cog and the Lambent forces until he learned about Delta's plan to sink Jacinto, so he informed Queen Myrrah and then confronted Delta Squad. And during this battle, Tiggers were deployed, but that didn't work. Skorge would cut down pillars in the ceiling to drop down on Marcus and Dom, and when that failed, he engaged them in melee combat, but his staff was broken during a struggle with Marcus. With Skorge losing this battle, he chose to run by calling his personal Hydra to pick him up, and with it, he chased Marcus and Dom as they used some Reavers to escape. As they fought off the Hydra, it was eventually killed, and as it crashed to the ground, Skorge was thrown from the creature and died from the impact of hitting the ground. During the game's early development, some artwork of Skorge showed him having a huge chainsaw blade on his right arm, but later this was changed, and now he wields a dual chainsaw staff. Marcus also mentioned that Skorge was one of the most ferocious enemies he and his squad ever faced during the war against the Locust. Now, I thought Skorge's design was the opposite of General Raam, but when I compare the two of them, my favorite is General Raam. Which one do you prefer? Let me know in the comments section. The Locust Horde in Gears of War had many types of creatures within their army, each one playing a specific role in the war against the coalition of governments. The Locust army is very resourceful in using almost any creature for combat. They operate in a military-like fashion, similar to humans, having generals or commanders of an army and setting up potential strikes on a human outpost. One specific unit that I've always liked are the Cantus. They are bipedal and act as a support class. Their high standing in the army does allow them to issue orders to the other units. The Cantus were a religious species in the Locust army. They acted as monks and worshipped the Riftworms and Rockworms. One of the Riftworms was awakened in Gears of War 2 and was used to destroy the cities of Ilima, Montevado, and Tolan. The Cantus would see the Riftworm as a deity or a god, because it was a life giver. It was also controlled by the Cantus high priest Skorge. There was also a sacred Cantus scroll that contained verses. This was a way of communication to the Rockworms when they were to be used in combat. It's possible Skorge may have used these scrolls to command the Riftworm. A holy symbol was made in honor of the three Riftworms. Each of them are shown on the religious artifact called the Trinity of Worms. This item also held sacred text about the Locust Queen making drones to protect Nexus, which is the capital of the Locust Horde. Nexus was located near the center of the Inner Hollow, which was deep underground. Its physical structure was similar to a hive. It included caverns, bridges, torture chambers, a barracks, blood-mount stables, and a royal palace. The last religious artifact that was found was a tablet. It mentions how the Riftworms were used to create the Hollow, and one of them was awakened by something light and hot, most likely the light mass bomb at the end of the first game. The comic books even showed a scene when Raam and Skorge would fight together against the Lambent. This took place some time ago during the Locust Civil War. This was a time when General Sraak was in charge of the Locust army. He was even larger than Raam. While Raam was loyal to the Queen with honesty about the situation in the Hollows, Sraak would lie to the Queen, just telling her what she wanted to hear. Skorge even mentioned that at some point, having a very high position in the Locust army would grant them exclusive breeding rights, but he also said Drudge tentacles were involved during this process, although this could have been a joke. It's possible that after these events, Raam would become a general by proving his loyalty to the Queen. Now, compared to the drones in the Locust army, the Cantus appeared taller and leaner. Aside from giving out orders to a group of Locust, they would also use their special chanting to heal any injuries on most Locust targets. This special ability could also pick up any downed Locust left crawling on their knees, but this would also come with a fault. Upon being picked up, the drone would be filled with a life force while being unable to move for a few seconds. This scream would also knock back any human too close to the Cantus. While the Cantus were known to be intelligent leaders of small groups, they are mostly involved in ambush techniques. The majority of the Cantus were mostly known to use the ink grenades and Gorgon submachine guns. Skorge was unique, to where he would rely on his dual chainsaw staff. He was also known to be very agile. The Cantus name actually means to sing. This was taken from the translation of cantus or cantar from the Latin language. It's a very fitting name because it's linked to its ability of chanting to heal other locusts. Its chanting was also translated to what could possibly mean rise, or perhaps this was just what one Cantus said in that story. After the Lambent Brumak died, the flooding caused many locusts to evacuate the hollow. This forced some Cantus to separate from the queen. Without any guidance, they would form tribes and revert to their primal instincts. They were known as the Savage Cantus. Now, other factions of the Cantus were later given massive amounts of onyx body armor. They were seen as an elite class of Cantus. This gave them more durability to withstand minor bullets, but explosives were still very effective on them. They were still able to heal the other locusts, but this chanting would leave them exposed to critical areas like the face or mouth. They are rarely seen because they are affiliated with the Queen and are only sent out on special missions by her. While their weapons would be limited to mostly dual Gorgon submachine guns, they would not use ink grenades. Originally, they were given Boltok pistols, but this was removed later on. Their thick, bladed armor could also be used as a weapon. They would use their spiky armor to roll forward in an offensive manner. What happened to the Kryll in Gears of War? After the original game, we did not see them in the storylines that continued afterwards, but the Kryll were very unique, just like the other creatures in the Gears of War franchise. The Kryll were very small, reaching almost 3 inches long, but they were still ferocious predators. Their attack methods would be to travel in a pack and overwhelm a target as they fly through the air. They were natural carnivores, so they would eat almost any type of animal. They would even feed on humans and locusts. They lived in the Outer Hollows, which was a network of underground tunnels. The Hollow would serve as the realm to many different life forms. Most of the Hollow is unexplored by humans, so a lot of species could be left unidentified or never discovered. Humans have known about the Outer Hollows for some time, and even did some mapping on these areas. This also served as a dumping ground for centuries. This led the locusts to salvage what the humans would throw out. The Kryll were one of many creatures within the Hollow, and because there was no natural light underground, they would hunt in darkness. During the day, they would sleep in the Outer Hollows, waiting for nightfall, and only then would they emerge to hunt in swarms. As they attack in numbers, their sharp teeth rips away at the flesh of their victim until nothing is left. Sometimes, not even the bones are left behind. The Kryll were known to attack the locust, but chose to ignore them when there were plenty of humans to feed on instead. During the war against the humans, the locusts did manage to weaponize the Kryll in some manner. The Theron guards would sometimes use a special grenade that would attract a swarm of Kryll. While the Kryll are very small, they are still very dangerous. Their tiny bodies consist of a worm-like design. The head is blunt and they have yellow eyes. Behind the head area are 6 limbs attached by a thin membrane that serve as wings. Since the Kryll are subterranean creatures, exposing them to sunlight will cause them to burst into flames. Explosives would also cause the Kryll to scatter apart. So this brings up the question, why we don't see the Kryll anymore after the first game. Well, it seems when the light mass bomb exploded within the Hollow, this wiped out their entire species, including their breeding grounds. A Locust tablet even mentioned that something light and hot had killed off the Kryll. This gave the humans some sense of peace at night, but the Locusts were not destroyed. The light mass bomb ended up awakening the Riftworm, which led to another big problem. Now, while Skorge might have used a sacred scroll to communicate with the Riftworm, there's almost no record of how General Raam was able to control the Kryll. At the time of making this video, the comic book about the rise of Raam just released issue number 1, and we're not going to get the 4th issue until the end of April in 2018, so I won't be able to read the entire story for another few months. But if it does explain how Raam was able to control the Kryll, I'll make a video for that topic later on. The Kryll were mostly seen in the first game, but they made an appearance in the expansion pack to Gears of War 3 called Raam's Shadow. However, this was a prequel story. The Locust would use the Nemesis to ink the sky in blocking out the sunlight. The Kryll storm would then be unleashed upon Elima City. General Raam was playable in the expansion pack, so you got some sense of what it's like to command the Kryll. They acted as a shield around Raam. He would then send them out to attack a target, and then they would fly away, only to return back to General Raam later on. This story, when Raam was playable, would take place during the day, so it does not make sense why the Kryll would not get burned from the sunlight. Perhaps this was overlooked just to keep them playable, but one theory is that their bodies were covered in ink. There was also some concept art of the Kryll's breeding grounds and a section where they would return in Gears of War 2, but they were both removed to continue with the story of their extinction from the Lightmass bomb. The writer Joshua Ortega of Gears of War 2 and Gears of War Hollow did mention that there could have been other species of Kryll. The Kryll's design was inspired by the infant version of the Bioraptor in a 2000 movie called Pitch Black. Their younger stages would be similar in a sense of flying in a swarm and only coming out at night. They would also be sensitive to sunlight. The Kryll, along with Raam, did make an appearance in the video game Killer Instinct. So that covers the Kryll in Gears of War. What are Berserkers in Gears of War? When it comes to raw power and speed, the Berserker comes to mind. Although it is extremely powerful and heavily armored, it suffers from being blind, and so they rely on their sense of smell and hearing to locate their prey. This Locust is actually a female and displays extreme aggression and is normally set loose on solo missions. Driven by rage and the intent to kill, the Berserker is a very dangerous Locust. Although their thick skin is resistant to bullets, they can be damaged for a short time when they come into contact with fire. Therefore, weapons like incendiary grenades, a flamethrower, and the Hammer of Dawn are ideal weapons during an encounter with a Berserker. They have two attack methods. Once they locate a target, they will charge in a straight line using enough force to knock down a human, destroy fortifications, and even instantly kill a downed target. Their second attack is a double-fisted smash on the ground. This attack can destroy equipment and is very useful on humans. Now, a Berserker was encountered by Kilo Squad, and they took it down by using flamethrowers that were acquired from Flame Boomers. Another Berserker appeared at a school, and it was killed by Zeta 6 Squad when they lured it to smash into vehicles. The explosion put the Berserker on fire, and after many vehicles were used in the same manner, it was killed. Then, during the Lightmass offensive mission, two Berserkers fought against Marcus and Dom in different situations. They were both killed with the use of the Hammer of Dawn. They also fought a third one on the Tyro Pillar train, but with no way of using the Hammer of Dawn this time, due to the ink from the Nemesis, they were forced to lure the Berserker to the back of the train and detach the last car. The Berserker was either crushed or thrown away in this encounter. Later on, Jay Stratton also encountered a Berserker on his own. When he lost track of his team, he ended up on a cliffside in darkness. Then later on, a Berserker emerged from a cave. It was lured over the edge as Marcus came down in a ladder to save Jace. The Berserker fell to its death. Then, 18 months after the events of flooding the Hollow, the Berserkers showed up infected with emulsion. This made them bigger, stronger, faster, and more dangerous. They grew tentacles on their backs, which could be used as weapons, and their hearts were visible with a glowing gold color. Although this infection made the Berserkers stronger, it also gave them a new weakness. The only way to damage them was to shoot their heart, and the chest cavity would only open up when they charged, jumped, or were put on fire. The lambent Berserker would also leave a trail of emulsion as it ran across the field. This would damage anyone stepping in it. Now, the Locust Berserker was playable in Beast Mode of Gears of War 3, but its eyesight was modified to give the player some sense of vision, so it was not totally blind in this occasion, and the lambent Berserker was not playable at all, although I really want to use that version in Beast Mode as well. The Berserker is one of my favorite Locusts in Gears of War, alongside the armored Cantus and General Raam. So what is your favorite Locust in Gears of War? Let me know in the comments section. What is the Brumak in Gears of War? These creatures were seen as one of the largest species in the Hollow. They can grow from 39 to 49 feet tall, and their weight was around 22,000 pounds. Its heavy armor provided weapons and durability in combat, but it also slowed down its running speed. Its role amongst the Locust was an armored walking arsenal. Despite wearing a helmet that showed multiple luminescent lenses that looked like eyes, underneath its armor, the Brumak only had 2 eyes. So judging by its physical appearance, it looks like a bipedal creature with big guns. But what exactly is it? Some COG research had discovered it was bred from apes. These animals were biologically engineered into Brumaks. Further research suggests they may have had reptilian DNA because of the hard patches on their skin, small tails, and sharp claws. The Brumak is equipped with 2 chain guns on each arm, along with a rocket launcher on its back that points over its head. Some Brumaks were seen to shoot rockets from the guns on their arms, as it was shown in the first Gears of War game. Along with their weaponry, the Brumaks have extreme amounts of physical strength, able to push over an assault derrick, which was used for mining emulsion, and they can also smash up other vehicles with their hands. Some Brumaks may even go into a fit of rage during combat. They would rip the rocket launcher off their back, destroy it, and continue fighting on. While some Brumaks were shown to have a Locust driver on their backs, other Brumaks were depicted without the driver. When a Brumak is shown without a driver, it still retains full control of all its weapons. The method of defeating a Brumak is to disable its machine guns on each arm, and then destroying the fuel tank on its back. This would result in a massive explosion, destroying the Brumak's body. In Gears of War 2, a Brumak was mutated by the emulsion. It grew long tentacles, its jaw would protrude outwards, and its arms would shrivel up and lose muscle mass. And like most life forms infected with emulsion, this Brumak became a giant bomb. It was destroyed with the Hammer of Dawn. The Swarmak was another variation that appeared in Gears of War 4. The crystals on its body were a result of the emulsion countermeasure weapon designed by Adam Phoenix. This device was supposed to emit specific radiation waves to kill a certain life form. It was used on the Locusts, but it did not kill them. They were just disabled. After a while, their bodies started to form indestructible crystals. The COG were not able to destroy the crystals forming on their bodies, so they were dumped in burial sites until they would rise again. The Swarmak used the same weapons as before, but it was also shown to have blisters on its body. These were the weak points that only appeared after the Swarmak suffered electric shock. What are boomers in Gears of War? The Locust Horde is comprised of many types of units. The boomers were 8 feet tall, very strong and fat, but surprisingly, they could move pretty fast for their size. The boomers were considered to be the heavy weapons specialists in the Locust army. They were actually less intelligent than the other Locust. This could be why they were given simple instructions during an attack. Their task was mainly to carry a big gun and shoot. When it came to combat, they were determined and fierce, but also they would not think about their actions. This could also be the reason as to why they would sometimes charge into battle and not even consider it may cost them their lives. During the war against the humans and the Lambent, many variations of the boomers were seen. The standard version was simply called the Boomer because it carried the boomshot weapon, which is basically a grenade launcher. The boomers would typically say boom right before they would fire their weapon. Their physical appearance looks similar to a drone, except with a lot more mass on them, which is why they are harder to put down. During the boomers' early development, they were originally called Potbelly, and their design was inspired by the robots in the Bubblegum Crisis anime. There are other variations of the boomers, but one of them has gone back to their tribal mindset, the Savage Boomers. They appeared sometime after Emergence Day. Their armor has a different design. Their helmets are larger and pointed at the top, while the mouth area is exposed. They also wear a large collar that resembles what is worn by the Grinders. A large breastplate provides more protection while also having a belt that carries more digger ammunition. Their main weapon of choice is the digger. It's actually a small burrowing creature that was enslaved by the Locust. They are attached to explosives and used to dig underground towards a target behind cover, and then they pop up and explode. When the digger projectile is fired upon a target, it latches onto them and chews into their chest and explodes. It was mentioned by Cliff Bleszinski that if you listen closely, you can hear the digger say num 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 as it travels towards you on the ground. The Savage Boomer also says the word dig right before firing its weapon. The Savage Boomers don't obey orders like the other boomers. They simply rely on their basic instincts when attacking. This shows that they have lost contact with the Queen, therefore having little use of strategy in combat. During the development of Gears of War 3, a Master Boomer was being designed, and its purpose was to control the wretches. Its weapon was a metal whip with blades on it. The wretches would sit in the backpack as the Master Boomer would transport them around. It was a very unique idea, however, it was eventually cancelled. The Flame Boomers are another variant that are equipped with flamethrowers. They carry a fuel tank on their backs that are filled with emulsion. This fuel is used to power their flamethrowers. They wear more armor than a standard boomer and a wielding helmet covering their face. While they are heavily armored, it will take a lot of shots to put them down, but you also have the option of damaging the fuel tanks on their backs. When it's damaged, it will eventually explode over time. Now, another variant within the Locust Horde is the Grinder. It's basically a boomer that uses the Mulcher machine gun. It says the words grind right before shooting. The Grinders can lay down a constant barrage of bullets on enemy troops. The armor on their body is standard except for the collar and the helmet. It's possible that the collar is used as protection from the shells expelled from their own gun. Their helmets are designed to give more protection against headshots. We also have the boomers who served as the chefs in the Locust Horde. Here we have the Butcher, who says hunger when they are encountered. The Butchers were the lowest class of boomers because they were not meant for combat situations. Their role was strictly meant for chopping up rockworms. The Cantus would summon the rockworms, the Locust would kill it, then it's brought to the Butchers. They chop it up, and the Locust feed on it. While the Butcher can still defend itself in a fight, it does have less armor than a standard boomer. There was another version of the Butcher called the Construction Boomer. It was armed with a large wrench. It was set to appear in Gears of War 2, but it was cut from development before the game was completed. The Butcher also made an appearance in the game called Infinity Blade 2. The blade on the cleaver was just a little longer. When the emulsion infected the Butchers, they would mutate into a Lambent Gunker. This mutation would attach the cleaver to its arm. This would serve as a close-range melee weapon, but its main role in combat is to throw a large amount of emulsion at the player, and just like all Lambent enemies, they explode upon death. So next up are the Maulers. They were equipped with boom shields and an explosive flail. They wore the standard boomer armor, but their helmets were horned. They would use their shields to block incoming bullets while advancing forward. There were some elite Maulers that accompanied General Raam during the Battle of Elima City. The only difference was that their shields would deflect incoming bullets. In the comic books, there was a unique Mauler that wore no armor. It was larger, stronger, and more muscular. He would smash through concrete walls and even knocked out Marcus in a single punch. It was part of a small group controlled by the scarred Cantus, but it was eventually killed when it walked into an explosive trap. And in the DLC of Raam's Shadow, there was a boomer called the Tremor. It carried a giant hammer. It was used to nail a spike into the ground. These spikes would give off vibrations for the Seeders to home in on, and from this location the Seeders would ink the sky and assist in blocking out the sunlight for the Kryll. So that covers the different boomer types in Gears of War. The story in Gears of War talks about the Hollow. It is an underground tunnel network beneath the surface of Sera. This place deep underground would house different types of life forms. One of these types was the Corpser. Its body type was very different, appearing as a spider-like creature with large limbs in the front. These large limbs were used for movement and attacking, and a few tiny legs were located at the side of its body. These were mainly for support and moving around. This life form was tamed by the Locust Horde and were used to dig tunnels across Sera. These tunnels are how the Locust would move undetected by humans. The tunnels would lead to the surface where the Locust would emerge. While the Corpser was known to break through some materials in the earth, they could not break through solid granite. Jacinto was placed on top of a granite plateau that prevented the Locust from using the Corpsers to dig holes. However, when the light mass bomb detonated inside the hollow, the shockwaves would weaken the granite. which would later allow the Corpser and the Riftworm to break through it. They mainly used their front limbs for attacking. The Corpser did show some level of intelligence in combat. They would burrow into the ground and set up ambushes, but can also burrow into the ground to regenerate their health. Or they would dig through the ground and choose a target, or to avoid fortifications. While underground, they can also use a claw to attack their prey. The Corpser species are ruled by a mother. She would lay eggs, and over time, they would hatch into baby Corpsers. As they feed, they would grow larger and stronger. As they grow in size, their front limbs would become so hard that bullets would not penetrate them. When Dom and Marcus encountered a Corpser in the first game, they had to shoot its belly and face to push it back into a pit of emulsion. The Corpser could also be defeated by using the Hammer of Dawn, but this would require the target to be out in the open. The mother Corpser was seen to take damage in her eyes, but during combat, she would call for her children to aid her. When all of her eyes were destroyed, she would run around blind, rampaging through everything. Now, at a certain point in time, the Locust would equip body armor on these creatures and call them the Savage Corpser. These units were ideal for combat situations. This armor provided some level of protection to the front areas. Seeing as how the Corpser would run very slowly, this armor would give it more durability to last longer in combat. When encountering a Corpser with body armor, you would have to wait for its limbs to rise up, then shoot its face, underbelly, or rear end that is not covered by armor. In Gears of War Judgment, a mutated Corpser named Shibboleth became the personal mount of General Karn. One of its limbs was replaced with a mechanical prosthetic. It could also launch the Nemesis from its body. It's possible this creature was a combination of a Corpser and a Seeder. Unlike the other Corpsers, which had to be tamed and controlled by the Locust, Shibboleth was unique, that it chose to willingly serve General Karn. There was an Easter egg in Gears of War 2 that showed a Corpser wearing a cowboy hat. And in case you're wondering which creature is stronger, this game also had a scene where a Corpser would fight against a Brumak, but the Brumak was shown to be more powerful and knock the Corpser away. Out of all the creatures in the Locust Horde, I think one that disturbed me the most was the giant Serapede. I think it's the fact that it had so many legs that bothered me. So the Serapede showed up after the sinking of the city called Jacinto. One of the many creatures within the Hollow, they were also controlled by the Locust for combat situations. When they are confronted, they will stand up and search for a target by using their antennas. While they are very long, they still travel fairly quickly, fast enough to chase a human on foot. The Serapedes were heavily armored on their bodies. This made it difficult to deal with. Because most of the body was protected by armor, its main weak point is behind the tail. Shooting this part will destroy them piece by piece. This is the best method of defeating the Serapede, but some sources say you can also use a Scorcher on their head. While one person can handle a Serapede alone, it is somewhat troublesome to outmaneuver it and still find the time to shoot its tail. Therefore, it's recommended that at least 2 players take on a single Serapede. One person would serve as a distraction, while the other person would shoot the tail. Since the Serapede's weak spot is at the tail, its long body can peek around corners while taking minimal damage. So in some sense, you can hide your weak spot in the right situations. When it comes to attacking, it would use its front tendrils to give an electrical shock. This ability was adopted from the Electrophorus genes, similar to electric eels. While this attack does have some range, you can miss the target if you are too close. It's also not meant for taking out fortifications or sentry turrets. It was later given the ability to stand upright and spew acid. This would serve as a means of distraction and also give it more offensive capabilities. Since the normal-sized Serapede was more commonly seen, it was believed that the giant Serapedes had evolved unnaturally. But considering their size, they were obviously much more deadlier. When it comes to their offspring, they would create a nest of eggs and lay them within a webbed area. Their name is actually taken from a combination of 2 words, the planet Sera, where Gears of War takes place, and the other half of centipede. Put them together and you get Serapede. The giant Serapedes were used by the Locust in places like the destruction of Halvo Bay, evacuation of Elima City, and during the Lambent pandemic. and similar to a berserker, their vision is not completely clear. There are old stories about the Mongolian deathworm that could have inspired the creation of the giant Serapede. A report from 1922 listed the creature to be so poisonous that touching it could lead to instant death. So that covers the giant Serapede in Gears of War. One thing I like about the creatures in this franchise is that they are all unique in their own way. What if General Raam battled against Skorge? Who would win and how? Now let's look at their strengths and weaknesses. Skorge was seen to be very agile. He could jump very high and ambush a player by reaching hard-to-reach places. He is also skilled in melee combat. His weapon of choice is a dual chainsaw staff. Although he does wear body armor, some parts are exposed which tend to put less weight on him. General Raam is seen to be very slow, but he has incredible brute strength. He can literally punch through walls, so that amount of force can do some big damage on a target. He can probably break through Skorge's armor and seriously injure him, but with his slow speed and full body armor, Raam is not as agile as Skorge. Raam is a tank with only his head being exposed. On top of that, Raam can control the Kryll to protect them from damage or use them as a weapon. Now, I can see this battle going in a few ways. One could be Raam using the Kryll to attack Skorge and rip him apart before he gets close. The other scenario could be Skorge waiting for Raam to unleash the Kryll. Then Skorge would jump to quickly evade them. Then as he comes down, he could try to cut Raam's head. It might work, but Raam could still use his dagger in close-range combat. But I think Skorge would be quicker at this range, and his staff having longer reach, he would have the advantage. But by this time, the Kryll would return to Raam and shield him. So unless Skorge can get a quick attack on Raam's head when the Kryll are not around, I don't see Skorge taking this fight. Even though Skorge's weapon can cut through the armor of a tank, it can surely cut through Raam's body armor. But the problem is finding that opening, that one chance to strike with a deadly attack. So between these two characters and the scenarios I'm thinking, I would have to say that Raam would win this battle. So who do you think would win in a fight, Raam or Skorge? Put your answer in the comments section. Queen Myrrah, self-appointed leader of the Locust Horde. The story of Queen Myrrah is hidden deep within the lore of Gears of War. Now I'm going to explain how she fits into the story and how she's connected to the Lambent and the Locust. Now, according to some information from the Epic forums, a long time ago, emulsion was discovered by humans and used as a possible fuel source, since their other resources were running out. While it was in a slowly evolving state, it would still infect some life forms, but would not cause rapid mutations. Some miners would develop an emulsion sickness called rust lung. The government would keep using this fuel source while trying to find a cure for rust lung. While the Locust remained hidden deep underground, the humans were unaware of their presence, but they did stumble upon some type of rock locust, which seemed to have a stronger resistance to the emulsion sickness, so it was taken back to the New Hope Research Facility to be studied. The scientists would run tests on this locust by mixing its genes with some of the miners who were sick with rust lung. While the miners would later mutate into the creatures known as the Sires, they then became uncontrollable and deemed as a failed experiment. So, they are essentially humans infected with Lambent and mixed with Locust DNA. Now, as to the exact answer of is Queen Myrrah a Locust or human, some websites list Myrrah as a child of the scientists who conducted these tests. But according to Collectible in Gears of War 2, the children of the miners would develop altered genes, but only one of them had a high success rate of developing this resistance to lambency. Her name was Ruth. As for the other children, they had lambency in their cells from birth, and so they turned into the Locust or Sires. I only bring up Ruth because her face has some similarities to Queen Myrrah. Although it's unclear what happened to Ruth, it's possible she was one of the children and became a sire, but some people believe she became Queen Myrrah. While Queen Myrrah led the Locust army, the emulsion sickness would spread amongst the other Locust and turn them into Lambent. Their numbers would outgrow the Locust, and so a war began between the two factions. And according to the comic books, this was during a time when General Sraak was in command of the army, and Raam had joined forces with Skorge to fight against the Lambent. While they both risked their lives against the Lambent, General Sraak was giving lies to the Queen. But when the truth came out about their situation against the Lambent, Sraak was then sent to the front lines against the Lambent. He was a failure as a general and a leader. This was the moment when Raam was appointed as general. Queen Myrrah also mentions that she had made contact with an outsider, a human who can help them get rid of the Lambent. This human was Adam Phoenix. But later on she realizes she placed false hope in the human, and those plans are taking too long. Adam Phoenix could not help Queen Myrrah because he was ordered by the government to create weapons of mass destruction, weapons like the Hammer of Dawn. At some point in time, Queen Myrrah was going to consider contacting the humans and asking for help against the Lambent, but she thought humans would never accept her people and would only try to dominate them. So Queen Myrrah cared for the survival of the Locust, so she and General Raam agreed to invade the surface. This moment was called Emergence Day. I also want to cover the topic of how the Locust reproduce. Queen Myrrah actually has no involvement at all. There's a collectible in Gears of War 2 that says the Locust reproduce by mating with the Berserkers. Now, during the Gears of War story, the government decides to use the emulsion as fuel through a process called light mass processing. But this later gets turned into a weapon called the light mass bomb, and is used at the end of the first game to wipe out the Locust. While it does kill off a lot of Locust, the bomb also causes the emulsion to generate accelerated growth properties. So this caused an even bigger problem for the surviving Locust in the Hollow. The emulsion would then become more infectious and cause extreme mutations. This caused the Locust to wage a war against the humans for survival. The comic book about Raam even shows that the Locust run their own experiments. The mount that General Karn used was a mutated corpser. Shibboleth was intentionally created by Ukon. While the Locust had developed a very small resistance to the emulsion sickness, when they got infected it made them stronger. But for human miners living near any emulsion, their bodies would become weaker and just wither away. This is because humans did not develop any type of resistance to the emulsion. It seems many high-ranking members like Raam, Skorge, Ukon, and Karn hated the previous general, Sraak. His poor leadership led to the death of many Locusts. It also shows the strong bond and trust that is shared between Skorge and Raam. They refer to each other as brothers, not by their rank. Now, at some point in time, Myrrah searched for Adam Phoenix and found him on the island of Azura. There he was taken hostage and forced to continue his work on the emulsion countermeasure device. Myrrah wanted the device to kill the Lambent and humans, but Adam knew that was not possible. Adam tried to help Myrrah all those years, but he ran out of time. Adam was trying to prevent Emergence Day, and Myrrah had agreed to wait, but she also ran out of time. Now the story of her being completely human is also linked to the end of Gears of War 3. The emulsion countermeasure device, designed by Adam Phoenix, was going to target the Locust and Lambent cells in any living being. The ending of Gears of War 3 shows that Myrrah was not affected by the weapon, which means she was human, and in the end, she was killed by Marcus Phoenix. She is mostly seen accompanied by the armored Cantus, and she sends them out on special missions. Her mount of choice is the Tempest, a giant beetle with 4 wings, and its body was covered in gold armor. Its main method of attack was an extremely hot beam of light emitting from its mouth. Myrrah's original name was going to be the Geist Allmother, and during the Raam Shadow DLC, she communicated with Raam telepathically. Maybe this could be a unique power, or perhaps it was given the illusion of telepathy just for the sake of the story. So that covers Queen Myrrah in Gears of War.